Okay, now we're going to return to the Philippines. A bit earlier, we studied some characteristics of Ilocano. Now we're going to turn to Tagalog, which is the most frequently spoken language in the Philippines. In fact, it's actually been renamed Filipino. That's why I have both names on the slide here. We're going to look at another morphological process of word building known as reduplication. Reduplication can be seen in words like takbu, meaning run, lakad, meaning walk, and pili, meaning choose. This question mark without the dot on it, we'll come to that when we study phonology and phonetics, but it's basically the sound you hear in the middle of uh-oh, uh-oh. So it would be pili, pili. Okay. In the present tense, the forms of these words, these verbs are shown here. In the future tense, so will run, will walk, will choose, right, are pronounced tatakbu for will run, lalakad for will walk, and pipili for will choose. So clearly the future affix is a kind of prefix, but it doesn't have its own segments. It doesn't have its own sounds. It depends on the sounds of the base it attaches to for how it gets pronounced. So the Tagalog future is a prefix. It comes at the beginning of the base, not after. It's not an infix or a suffix. It's a prefix. But it's simply a sequence of a consonant and a vowel. And it's a different consonant and a different vowel depending on the word it attaches to. So in takbu, meaning run, the first two segments, t, a, kind of get reduplicated, or they get duplicated and repeated at the beginning of the word to have the meaning of future, tatakbu. But if the word begins la, la, like walk, lakad, then it's the la that gets repeated, lalakad. Or if it begins pi, the p of pili becomes pipili. So we reduplicate the first two segments and add them to the beginning as a prefix to express the tense, the verb tense, future. Now, that's an example of partial reduplication because we reduplicate part of the word, just the first two segments, the first two speech sounds. There are also examples of full reduplication where you repeat the full word. Right? So in Turkish, for example, there are adverbs like çabuk, meaning quickly, yavaş, meaning slowly, iyi, meaning well, and güzel, meaning beautifully. Right? And then when they get marked for a kind of intensifier, so meaning very quickly or very slowly, they use full reduplication. So rather than çabuk, meaning quickly, çabuk çabuk is really quickly, very quickly. Yavaş, instead of yavaş for slowly, yavaş yavaş for very slowly. İyi, iyi iyi for very well. Güzel, güzel güzel for very beautifully. So this is full reduplication. You basically repeat the whole word and it acquires the meaning of very, whatever the adverb is. Yeah. Now, it's not unique to Turkish. Indonesian is a completely unrelated language, which also has adverbs like orang. Oh, sorry, these are not adverbs. I obviously copied and pasted this. Sorry, that should say nouns. Excuse me. Orang is a noun meaning man. Anak is a noun meaning child. And manga is a noun meaning mango. Right? And to mark them for a variety of or all sorts of, right, there's full reduplication. So orang means all sorts of men, or anak, all sorts of children. Manga, all sorts of mangoes, right, expressed by reduplication, full reduplication. Okay. Now let's go back to Tagalog then to look at another characteristic of morphology. We saw this before in Ilocano and Tagalog, also spoken in the Philippines. also exhibits examples of infixation. Remember, infixation is a form of affixation where the morpheme, the affix, is inserted within the base it attaches to. So words like sulat, meaning right, bili, meaning by, kuha, meaning take, graduate, meaning graduate, alis, meaning leave, they can be marked with a morpheme that has a kind of grammatical function. It changes the relationship of nouns to the verb in a kind of complicated way, which we don't study here, but we'll just look at the word form itself. So when it gets marked with this infix, it becomes sumulat. Right? Sulat is right. Sumulat is to write, but kind of changing the focus of who's doing the action. Bili becomes bumbili, and kuha becomes kumuha. So you can see that the is being inserted between, there's a mistake here. Sorry, it's not bumbili, it's bumili. Sorry about that, that's a mistake. I'll fix that, my mistake. Kumuha, the has been inserted after the k and before the u, right? And here's the interesting one, right? So graduate has a gr, has two consonants before the vowel, and then the gets inserted before the vowel. So it's kind of two segments in. So it's not gumraduet, but rather grumaduet, where the comes immediately before the first vowel. In fact, that's what happens in these cases. In alis, there's no consonant at all. And so it actually appears like a prefix because there's no consonant to move inside of. So the word alis begins with a vowel. The appears just before the vowel, which in this case is at the beginning of the word, umalis. So that's infixation. So we have this affix, this morpheme, that marks a focus shift. It's an infix, and it has a particular set of segments, right? Now, we actually have a kind of infixation in English. It's not really, it's not a word formation process that involves a morpheme. It's certainly not inflection, but there's a kind of, how do you describe it? A kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but we can insert a word, and to be honest, it's usually a kind of offensive word, a swear word, but I'll use a little kind of softened version here. So you take a word like absolutely, right? And then we really want to intensify it, right? And so someone might say abso-bloomin'-lutely. Well, blooming might be replaced with something different, but for my example, it illustrates the same point. But the word gets separated. Now, in English, it's not inside the first consonant. It's actually a more complex structure. It has to be a pair of syllables. The stress has to be in a particular position. But absolutely, we can insert the blooming before the stressed syllable. Abso-blooming-lutely, right? Meaning, in a very intensive absolutely, right? Or fantastic can become fan-bloomin'-tastic, right? Again, before the stressed syllable. Or unbelievable becomes unblooming-believable. That's interesting, unblooming-believable. In this case, it's between the prefix and the word. Absolutely and absolutely, it's actually being inserted in the word. Whereas unbelievable, it's being inserted between the prefix and the base. This is closer to what I was looking for, right? Educational, edge-of-blooming-cational, right? Would be a type of infixation. Not so much morphological. Well, it is morphological in that it fits within the words, but it's not an inflectional affix like we've seen in other languages.